Hi, welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Creighton, and I'm coming at you live from our nation's capital in Ottawa. When we come back, why the CBC has to be defunded and the truth about the polling right now.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change, but we also need to resolve to resist. Happy Easter Eve, if you will. It's Saturday, the 19th of April. Tomorrow is Easter Sunday. I hope you have a blessed Easter Sunday, and I hope you had a very good Easter Friday. But a couple of notes before I get into the main topics today, which of course are CBC and the polling, which I can't say enough about, but I'm raring to talk about it. But I was at a church service yesterday, a Good Friday church service, and a very good friend of mine who is a regular viewer of this show, and he probably watches a good dozen shows on YouTube like this one. He had just returned from a trip, and he was noticing the preponderance of Liberal Party election signage around, including 3 signs near the church where we were attending the Good Friday service. And he said to me, "What's wrong with Canadians? Are they that stupid that they would actually consider giving the Liberals another term after the catastrophe they've left us? Do they really think Mark Carney represents change? That he had nothing to do with Justin Trudeau's administration?" I hope Canadians aren't that stupid. But you know what? I hear stupid people being interviewed all the time by the mainstream media saying that they really think Mark Carney sounds moderate, reasonable. And they were even impressed by the fact he said nothing during the English language debate and wouldn't look Pierre Poilievre in the eye, would not even look the camera in his face. He's constantly looking over here, over there, like he's detached from the event. And this is what I'm concerned about, that too many Canadians also are detached from this election campaign and they don't get it. Now, yes, there have been some polls conducted, and over that English language debate. Now, this is the best news Pierre Poilievre has from the polls that are coming out. And this shows he edged out Mark Carney in terms of which leader did more to win your vote. And I certainly think that's true. As I said yesterday, it was not a knockout punch. I don't think Poilievre was aggressive enough, but I think he did a good job at defining Mark Carney as a continuation of the Justin Trudeau government. And as somebody who is still a firm believer in woke policies and net zero policies and bad policies. However, explain this one to me. How did Mark Carney come out on top as the person who impressed people as the best leader? And clearly, he's about 5 points ahead. Pierre Poilievre. Mark Carney looked like anything but a leader during that English language debate. He looked like, at times, like he was imploding, like he was searching for the right words, like he had forgotten the talking points, And he was thinking, can somebody please give me my script? Because I can't remember what I'm supposed to say. Now, anybody who's out there on YouTube this morning saying, Pierre is surging in the polls, in the first place, you don't even know Pierre. So let's stop being so personal about it. And he's not surging in the polls. What needs to happen? And this is what we discussed yesterday with Kyle Kemper, who was on the broadcast. We need to get as many conservative voters out. Yes. And I'm saying that because I don't want Mark Carney to win this election. I would like to see Pierre Poilievre win this election, of course, because I know he is the only option to beat Mark Carney right now. And we have just over a week. The conservative voters have to get out in large numbers. We do not need to tell them that Poilievre is surging and he's way ahead in the polls. That is irresponsible. That is completely contrary to good politics at this point in any election campaign. All that is clickbait. And that's why I'm being honest with you. I'm telling you what's actually happening. Here's Pierre Poilievre's best chance to win. Those NDP voters who are disaffected, dissatisfied, unhappy with the New Democratic Party because it's led by a clown by the name of Jagmeet Singh. It propped up the Liberal government. It propped up Justin Trudeau for 3 years. It has virtually been destroyed as a party. A lot of those NDP supporters are not going to the Liberals, and don't believe what you hear in the mainstream media. They're all going to the Liberals. No, they're not. Read this column about how the hard hat vote, which is what it was called in 1972 when Republican Richard Nixon reached out to working class Americans, to unionized Americans, and said, I'm the guy you want to vote for because I'm for safety in the streets. I'm for sanity. I'm for being tough on crime. And that's what Pierre Poilievre is saying and doing. And that's why he's appealing to blue collar workers who want to feed their families, live a normal life, afford a home, have food on the table, just to get by, and to prosper. That's what they want. They're not going to prosper under another Liberal government. So I encourage you to read that. But that's what the point. And if we have chance later, I'm going to put Nick Nanos on. And I've already said, I don't believe that 18 to 35 voters are breaking for the Liberals or that the gap is closing. I don't think 18 to 35-year-olds are that stupid to say, what does it matter if Mark Carney's elected? It doesn't matter if I won't be able to afford a home for the rest of my life. It doesn't matter if it's all going to be government housing that Mark Carney or his company might inevitably build. I'll be satisfied with Mark Carney. I don't believe that for a second, folks. Not for a second. And I think the message we need to get out right now is that this could be trouble. I've already said I think the polls are skewed. But when every last poll is indicating bad news for the guy you're supporting, you need to focus on getting the vote out and not POing your base. And unfortunately, Poilievre did that the night over Ukraine. He's done that at some events. He's got to be the guy talking about freedom. Now, let me get on the CBC here because this is incredible. Now, I've covered this to some extent the last couple of days. I can't leave it alone because for me, this represents, it's emblematic of everything that's wrong with our national press corps, which I said I was a member of for years. I know a lot of these people. I've worked with them. They have totally abdicated their responsibility to bolster or maintain free speech and a free press in this country. They're so subsidized by the federal government. They're so in the pocket of the Liberal government that they're now spewing the talking points of Mark Carney, Justin Trudeau, and all of those Liberals who want the mainstream media to be in the government's pocket. Now, thank God Pierre Poilievre hasn't backed down on defunding the CBC. He should defund Radio Canada too. That was a mistake to say, oh, we'll make an exception for the French language services. No, we shouldn't be making an exception for that. Defund them all. Taxpayers should not be subsidizing any media. We don't need any state media in this country. And now, I've got Rupa Subramanya was recently at a symposium discussing this. I'm going to have her on in a second, but let's watch what Pierre Poilievre said about defunding the CBC during the English language debate.
Left to right again, and 30 seconds this time. Monsieur Poilievre, you've previously promised to defund the CBC as one of your very first acts as Prime Minister. Is that still the plan?
Yes, CBC will continue to operate as a self-funded, Canadian-owned and controlled non-for-profit that raises money like other media organizations through sponsorships, subscriptions, advertising, licensing fees, and countless other things that will ensure Canadians who still want to listen and view its content will be able to do so. And at the same time, we'll allow freedom of the press so that everybody has their voice heard and they can make their own decisions.
Now, he seems to be introducing a concept here I haven't really heard before, meaning it should be Canadian owned. So whoever funds it has to be Canadian. That's probably a good idea, but I don't think he's actually specified or articulated that in the past. Now, why should the CBC be defunded? Because they want to be the only ones at the table, along with their kindred friends in the mainstream media. They want to exclude all new and independent media that refuses to accept government subsidies. They're not welcome at the table. They're not welcome at the news scrums. They're not welcome at the news conferences. They're not welcome on Parliament Hill. You can't get in as a journalist. And they don't want journalists outside of the mainstream media to get that pass. They don't want them inside. They don't want them asking questions. And listen to this exchange. This is so indicative of how evil the CBC has become. But let me tell you, you would hear the same thing from other mainstream media.
You spoke post-debate in those scrums. What did you hear from those scrums?
The post-debate scrums were dominated by right-wing media groups who flooded leaders with questions on topics unrelated to the debate.
Unrelated to the debate. Who makes up the questions for the debate? Why are we always talking about climate change at these debates when most Canadians don't give a damn about climate change, don't see it as some sort of existential threat, don't go to bed about it and worry? But these journalists want these questions to be the dominant ones and don't dare ask any other questions that are actually relevant to Canadians. If I seem upset about this, it's because I'm sick and tired of dealing with these types of reporters who want to exclude anybody that they don't like. And they call them right wing. Do you even know what right wing is? What are you suggesting? That there's some sort of fascist tendencies to independent media? Why? Because they believe in free speech? That's not fascist. That's not like what that guy in Germany did in the 1930s.
Asked Carney if he felt Trudeau was a good prime minister. Carney said that he was and that they have shared values, including taking care of Canadians, reconciliation and equality.
I'm curious what stood out to you, because at one point when some of those last questions came up, I just checked to make sure, yeah, no, we're in Canada. Because the identity politics questions have not emerged much.
This happens on the same day that the United Kingdom court ruled that woman and sex refer to biological woman and biological sex. True North is a very right-wing website. And
groups who flooded leaders with questions on
decided that these people...
It's not only very right-wing, it's a website. It's not even considered a media outlet by Rosemary Barton.
Allowed to come in and ask these kinds of questions. So there you go.
All right. Just watching it, having watched the debate, David, you know, the debate was one type of conversation. This feels very different.
I think the debate commission is going to need to be accountable for what's kind of happening here. They moved the time of the debate the day before. They kicked the Greens out the morning of, and they've opened up the scrums and the press access to a bunch of groups who sometimes are registered charities or have been defined by their owner as not actually a journalistic organization.
Now, this is BS. Who the hell is he talking about registered charities? Rebel News? Is that what he's talking about? It's not a registered charity. It's a media outlet.
Or have been ruled by the federal court to not be a journalistic organization. And in an election like this one, with very substantive debate on very substantive issues, moderated very well and executed very well by all the leaders, this is where this is going. I think I would like an explanation as a journalist.
Anything of substance that you heard there policy-wise, or that you've heard tonight that you hadn't heard before?
Not in any of these scrums, because they are being taken over by other agendas, right? And not, I think, necessarily helping a broad swath of voters. Some people maybe do want to hear some of these questions and answers, but broadly, I don't think they represent sort of what the ballot box question is about. We can talk more. Yeah.
All right.
Well, Rosemary Barton takes up a broad swath of the television screen, but does she actually understand what Canadian voters want to discuss, want to hear? It's not what you want at CBC, Rosemary. No. There are other issues out there, and they don't get addressed by the mainstream media. I'm going to show a bit of this again, because this is absolutely shocking. Once again, this is a conservative black journalist who works for Rebel News. Jagmeet Singh refuses to even answer her question. What if that was a liberal journalist from any mainstream media outlet who is also black? And Pierre Poilievre said, sorry, I'm not going to answer your questions because I think you're full of crap. I think you're pushing disinformation. What do you think the response would be from everybody in the mainstream media? Pierre Poilievre must be a racist. That would be the response.
With Rebel News. Your party takes great pride in standing against hate such as white supremacy, Islamophobia, and all.
Sorry, I didn't get your outlet.
Drea Humphrey with Rebel News.
Okay.
Your party.
You know where I'm going to go with this, all right?
Can I speak?
Yeah, you can. I'm just going to say you know where I'm going to go with it, though.
That over 200 churches have been targeted by arson and vandalism since claims of remains being discovered at former residential schools swept the nation in 2021. These claims have been disproven by bands that excavated and remain unproven by those that have not.
Again, thank you, but I'm not going to respond to an organization that promotes misinformation and disinformation like Rebel News, so no, I'm not going to respond to your question.
They have this truck going around with a video wall promoting conspiracy theories and allegations, mostly against Mark Carney. Let's face it, like we're showing it there.
Oh, it's a conspiracy theory to say Mark Carney supports net zero, even though that's been a campaign of Mark Carney's for the last 10 or 15 years. He headed up an organization that was dedicated, GFANS, that was dedicated to promoting and pushing net zero policies on banks, on corporations, on governments around the world. That's what Mark Carney is all about. But listen to Q-Ball Cochran's suggest that, oh, it's so bad. Rebel News is asking questions that are so bad we can't even show you what they are.
So you can see this on the screen. That is one of the few things we can show on TV that appears on the side of that. The same sort of thing happened with people stacking the microphones, and the questions is going in a totally different direction.
Well, there's only so much we can do to control free speech, you know.
I understand that.
You got to understand that.
But, lifeguards got to look after the pool, right?
Just gag the media.
And this is where we've ended up in this election. With everything going on with Donald Trump and everything going on in this economy and everything going on in the world, this is where the national Canadian election debate has ended up. And it's just exhausting. And it is the end product of multiple years of rage farming for.
Who's responsible for the rage here, Cochrane? You're the ones who can't stand sharing the stage, sharing the questions with anybody in the independent or new media. That's where I see the rage coming from. And just cry someplace else, you pitiful crybaby.
Narrow political gain and financial benefit for a very small group of people who blew this up today.
question of admitting the rebel news, et cetera, into this thing, I think we've now seen the last nail in the coffin of any idea that these people are just sort of alternative media or independent journalists or anything resembling. These were bully boys and thugs. These are performance artists. These are grifters.
All right. Andrew Coyne, what credibility do you have? Look at these. They parade these aging journalists up here to suggest that they're the keeper of the flame. They're the ones who enhance the truth. They're the ones who ensure that you get the news. They're the ones who filter all of that unnecessary content that you don't need to know about. That's what people like Andrew Coyne are doing. Now let's listen to Rupa Subramanya talk about why CBC needs to be defunded.
Already supplies news, entertainment, and commentary across countless platforms, television, radio, podcasts, streaming services, and of course, the internet. Canadians are not suffering from a shortage of media options. Yet, last year, the CBC received $1.2 billion in taxpayer funding. Its president and CEO took home $133,000 in bonus. Other executives of the CBC pocketed large bonuses even as the CBC was shedding staff and reporting declining ad revenues. So what we have is a taxpayer-funded broadcaster laying off its own employees while losing audience share, losing advertising revenue, draining advertising dollars away from private media, all while funneling bonuses to its executives. And for what exactly? CBC does not offer a unique public good. It distorts the media market by unfairly competing with private outlets. While pushing content, many Canadians increasingly feel marginalizes their views. They're forced to pay for a broadcaster that often seems openly hostile to their perspectives. As an example, just last week, I watched a segment where instead of questioning why Mark Carney is rising in the polls despite minimal public appearances and little scrutiny, the reporter at the CBC turned the question into an attack on Pierre Poilievre for supposedly dodging the question when he was asked why Carney was doing well despite few public appearances. This is not an isolated case. Take the ad issue panel with Rosemary Barton. It features mostly voices that are antagonistic to the Conservatives. Let me be clear. I'm not calling for the CBC and Radio Canada to be killed off. I think they should be spun off as independent entities. If they can raise funds from viewers, from private donors, or from institutional supporters, like what you have in the US with PBS and NPR, they should survive, but not on the public purse. Now, I anticipate a counter-argument that the CBC serves remote communities that the private media would ignore. This may have held some truth about half a century ago, but today we have something called the internet, and the barriers to entry for media production have never been lower. If there's a demand for local news, someone will meet it at a fraction of the cost and without forcing taxpayers to pay for it. Frankly, in my opinion, if there's a genuine public good here, it is universal broadband access, not propping up an outdated broadcasting model. So basically, in my opinion, there's no compelling case for a taxpayer-funded broadcaster in today's Canada. Canadians should be free to choose what they watch and read rather than being forced to fund a state-backed media outlet. And as history shows, public broadcasters are always at risk of becoming instruments of the state, not defenders of freedom, which is what I care about, but threats to it. The CBC is $1 billion taxpayer subsidy for a broadcaster many Canadians aren't watching. They're pushing narratives they don't trust in a media market that no longer needs it. It's time to pull the plug. I urge you to support the motion.
100% Rupa. And I'm trying to get Rupa on the show to talk about this very issue and the election before April 28th. Always enjoy listening to her talk and enjoy her writing. She's very, very articulate. And I always agree with what she's saying. I could also mention, I wrote a paper on this about 15 years ago, but why should we privatize the CBC? The question always was for me, if the CBC is so damn good, if they're so professional, if they're so necessary for Canadian unity, if they're so essential to keep Canada together, why can't they do that as a private sector outlet like everybody else? Why do they need $1.3 billion in your tax dollars to do that? The answer is they don't. And to add insult to injury, they're not only getting subsidized, they're going after, it's not ad free. So let them raise their own money like the private sector media outlets do. And I'll go one step further. Stop all subsidization of all media in this country immediately. This is another thing Pierre Poilievre needs to stress, needs to reinforce. Stop subsidizing media. It is an affront. It's an attack. It's an erosion of free speech in this country. We do not need media tied to the government through money. Media that's been bought off by the government. That's the worst possible respect. And in the time we have left, I want to show a bit about this. And this is not to say that it's dire for Pierre Poilievre. This is to say we need to get as many people energized about this election in the last week, because people will inevitably begin to believe the polls simply because they're repeated over and over again. I'm not even going to show this whole clip, but this is Nick Nanos essentially telling you that it's over for Pierre Poilievre. I don't believe that. But we need to ensure that people get out and vote on April 28th.
It is 3 days rolling from April 15 to April 17th. Sample by Nanos research shows the Liberals in the lead with over 45% support, almost 8 points ahead of Conservatives, who are at 37.1%. The NDP is third with over 8% support on the question of the preferred Prime Minister. Mark Carney is still in the lead at 48%. Pierre Poilievre is second at 33.6%. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is third, just below 5% support. Nick Nanos is here to break down the numbers. He is the founder and chief data scientist at Nanos Research. Nick, great to have you on the show. Thank you for your time.
Great to join you.
So walk us through the latest polling survey conducted April 15 to April 17th. Does the tracking include both the debates?
Yes, it does, actually. You know, the thing is going into the debates, the Liberals had about a 5-point advantage. According to the nightly tracking, and we tracked the night of the French debate, the night of the English debate, we still have a couple more days to see what the full impact of the debate might be for either one of the two frontrunners. But it suggests at least that the Liberals have been able to widen their margin from about 5 percentage points to 8 percentage points nationally, at least as of last night.
So where are we seeing this change? From where are the Liberals getting more numbers?
You know, it's interesting when you look at the breakdown that the Liberals are picking up some steam in British Columbia. The other thing is that the Liberals are starting to close the gap among younger voters. And if you remember, over the course of most of the campaign, and actually for the last couple of months, voters under 35 years of age had been most likely to favor the Conservatives. Now we're seeing the Liberals in the last week close the gap.
I'm sorry, I cannot buy that, Nick. That age group that has been probably the worst affected by the Trudeau government, the Trudeau-Carney government. Now they're going to the Liberals. I'm sorry, I don't believe that. I don't believe that gap is being closed. But I do believe we have to fight back on this. When I come back in a minute, some closing remarks about what my friend said in church yesterday and how that affects where we're going in the next week. Yeah, please visit the store. I haven't pushed or promoted or advertised the store in a few days. I've been doing a lot of interviews and they've been going a little over time, and I haven't really had time to promote it. But please have a look at the store. We've got some great great materials in there, the hats, the hoodies, the mugs. They all are ways for you to express not just your support for the station, but what you believe, what you stand for. And I think it's very important. So as I go back, and as I started this broadcast, my friend in my church yesterday asked me, are Canadians that stupid? I don't think so. And I think a lot of liberals and I think a lot of media people are going to be very surprised on April 28th. But I hope and pray Canadians aren't that stupid, because electing another Liberal government under Mark Carney will be even worse than the preceding one under Justin Trudeau. I cannot overstate that fact. Mark Carney is dangerous and toxic for Canada. It's that simple. It's Easter Sunday tomorrow. Please go to church if you're a Christian. Jesus Christ is King. And I can say that because we still have freedom of religion in this country. I wish you all the best. My show will be a little later tomorrow because I'm going to church at 9 o'clock. So I'll probably be doing a noon or later show. We've got some exciting guests on next week. Just confirmed Colonel Douglas McGregor, who you know from Redacted, and Judge Napolitano. He's on every week there. He has his own show, Our Country, Our Choice. He is one of my heroes in terms of a military analyst who is, I think, 100% right 100% of the time. He's coming on the show Tuesday, and we've got Jasmine Lane on Wednesday, and I've got some other things cooking for later in the week. It's an exciting week ahead of us. God bless Canada. Keep on fighting for truth and freedom. And Godspeed. And I'm David Creighton, and I'll be back again tomorrow.